At the airport with his mistress, the husband lied, until the security guard called his wife's name. The rain drummed against the windshield as Juliet Carter sat in the parking garage of Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. 6 months pregnant, her rounded belly pressed against the seatbelt. She took a deep breath and reached for the small canvas bag on the passenger seat. Inside were Ethan's back support cushions, the ones he'd been complaining about needing for weeks, especially for long flights. He'd forgotten them again this morning in his rush to catch the 6:30 a.m. flight to London. Crucial for the new campaign launch, he'd said, kissing her forehead distractedly before disappearing into his black sedan. But something had been gnawing at her all day. The way he'd avoided her eyes when she'd asked about the trip details. The way he'd snapped his laptop shut when she'd walked into his home office last week. The way he'd started showering immediately after coming home from work, when he used to collapse on the couch first. Juliet adjusted her maternity sweater and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her face showed the natural glow of pregnancy, though dark circles under her green eyes betrayed her sleepless nights. At 35, she'd built a successful career as a brand manager for Luxe Cosmetics, one of the country's largest beauty retailers. She was intelligent, intuitive, and had always trusted her instincts. Today, those instincts were screaming. She'd called Ethan's office that morning asking his assistant Miranda about the London trip. "Oh, Mrs. Carter, I think there might be some confusion. Mr. Carter's flight today is domestic. He's heading to the West Coast for meetings with the Seattle branch." The lie hit her like a physical blow. Why would he lie about where he was going? Now, walking through the bustling terminal, her heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way toward the departure gates. The weight of the bag in her hand felt heavier with each step, but not because of the cushions inside. It was the weight of 6 years of marriage, of trust, of the future she'd imagined for their unborn son. The terminal was alive with the usual chaos. Families saying goodbye, business travelers checking phones, flight announcements echoing through the speakers. Juliet navigated through the crowd, her heart pounding as she approached Gate 23, where Ethan's actual flight was departing. She spotted him before he saw her. Ethan Carter stood near the boarding area, his 6'2" frame commanding attention even in the crowded space. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccable, his confident smile directed at someone just out of Juliet's view. He was laughing, a genuine, throaty laugh she hadn't heard him make in months. Then the crowd shifted, and Juliet saw her. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, with long blonde hair that caught the fluorescent lights. She wore a form-fitting black dress that hugged her slim figure, and heels that made her nearly as tall as Ethan. Her hand was on his arm, fingers playing with the fabric of his jacket sleeve in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. Juliet's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the woman, Ruby Lane, the new external consultant Ethan had mentioned hiring for the European expansion project. The same Ruby who had been CC'd on increasingly frequent emails, who had somehow needed to meet with Ethan at restaurants and coffee shops, always for strategic planning sessions. As Juliet watched, frozen in place, Ruby leaned closer to Ethan, her lips near his ear as she whispered something that made him chuckle. His hand moved to the small of her back, a gesture so familiar it made Juliet's stomach lurch. This was not a business meeting. This was not a professional consultation. This was her husband, the father of her unborn child, acting like a man who had never been married at all. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers. Flight 447 to Seattle, now boarding first class and premium members. Juliet's hands instinctively moved to her belly, where their son, Theo, they'd decided to name him, was growing stronger every day. She thought about the nursery they'd been planning, the crib they'd ordered together just last weekend, the way Ethan had kissed her stomach every morning and told the baby how excited he was to meet him. All of it felt like a lie now. But as she stood there, watching her husband prepare to board a plane with another woman, Juliet Carter made a decision that would change everything. She was going to walk over there. She was going to confront him, and she was going to see exactly what kind of man she'd married. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and began moving through the crowd, the canvas bag clutched tightly in her hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. What she didn't know was that in the next few minutes the truth would reveal itself in ways she never could have imagined. What would you do if you walked into an airport, 6 months pregnant, and saw your husband laughing intimately with another woman, about to board a plane together after lying about his destination? Would you confront them immediately? Or would you stay hidden and gather evidence first? Tell us in the comments. We want to know how you would handle this betrayal. Juliet moved through the crowd like a woman walking underwater, every step deliberate despite the chaos in her mind. The distance between her and Ethan felt both infinite and terrifyingly small. 20 feet. 15. 10. Ruby saw her first. The young woman's laugh died mid-sentence, her blue eyes widening as she registered the pregnant woman approaching them. Her manicured hand slipped from Ethan's arm and she took a subtle step backward, suddenly very interested in the departure board above their heads. Ethan followed Ruby's gaze, and the color drained from his face. Juliet. His voice cracked slightly on her name. What are you doing here? For a moment she couldn't speak. Up close, the betrayal was even more devastating. Ruby's perfume, something floral and expensive, lingered in the air around them. Ethan's tie was slightly askew, and there was a smudge of lip gloss on his collar that definitely wasn't Juliet's shade. I brought you something, Juliet managed, her voice steadier than she felt. She held up the canvas bag, watching as Ethan's eyes darted between her face and Ruby's increasingly uncomfortable posture. Oh, that's very thoughtful of you, sweetheart. Ethan's trademark charm kicked in, but it felt hollow, desperate. Ruby and I were just going over some last-minute details for the London presentation. The lie came so easily, so smoothly, that Juliet felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't the first time. This was practiced. London? Juliet's green eyes fixed on his face. I thought you were going to Seattle. She watched him process the trap, saw the moment he realized his story was falling apart. But Ethan Carter hadn't built his career without learning how to think on his feet. Yes, well, there was a change of plans. Last-minute client meeting in London instead. I was going to call you from the plane. He reached for the bag, his fingers brushing hers. Ruby here is part of the European expansion team, so she's coming along to handle the international logistics. Ruby nodded enthusiastically, her smile bright and fake. Yes, exactly. International logistics. Very logistical. Juliet looked at Ruby properly for the first time. She was beautiful in that effortless way that came with youth. Smooth skin, perfect makeup, a body that had never carried a child. Her dress was the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her shoes were designer. For a consultant's salary, she was living remarkably well. I see, Juliet said quietly. And this logistics meeting requires holding hands? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ruby's face flushed pink, and she looked down at her feet. Ethan's jaw tightened. Juliet, you're being ridiculous. We weren't. I saw you, she interrupted, her voice still calm but with an edge that made both of them straighten. I saw you laughing together. I saw your hand on her back. I saw her whispering in your ear. The boarding announcement interrupted them. Flight 447 to Seattle, now boarding Zone 1. Seattle, not London. Ethan's face went white as he realized his mistake. Ruby looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. So which is it, Ethan? Juliet's voice was deadly quiet. London or Seattle? Because that announcement seems pretty clear. Before he could answer, the airport's PA system crackled to life with a different kind of announcement. Juliet Carter, please report to Customer Service Desk 4. Juliet Carter to Customer Service Desk 4. All three of them froze. Ruby's eyebrows shot up. Carter? Like, Carter? A security officer approached their group, his radio crackling with static. Excuse me, are you Juliet Carter? Yes, Juliet replied, her heart hammering. Ma'am, we need you to come with us. There's an issue with a corporate credit card linked to your name. The transaction for these airline tickets can't be processed without your signature. The words hit like a physical blow. Ruby's mouth fell open as she stared at Ethan, then at Juliet, then back at Ethan. Your name? Ruby's voice was barely a whisper. The tickets are on her credit card? Ethan looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest chair. Ruby, it's not what you think. Oh my God. Ruby's voice was getting louder, attracting attention from other passengers. Oh my God, you're married to her. You're actually married to her and you've been paying for everything with her money? The security officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, we really need you to come with us. The flight is boarding and without your authorization, these tickets will be canceled. Juliet looked at the canvas bag in her hands, then at her husband. This man she'd loved, supported and trusted for 6 years. This man who was about to board a plane with another woman using her credit card. This man who had lied to her face while she stood there, pregnant with his child. Something inside her shifted. Not broke, shifted, like a lock turning. "Officer," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I'd like to speak with your supervisor about canceling my authorization for any future transactions on this account." Ethan's face went from white to gray. "Juliet, wait, and I'd like to file a report about unauthorized use of my corporate card for personal expenses." Ruby was backing away now, her designer heels clicking frantically on the terminal floor. I have to go. I have to go right now." "Ruby, wait." Ethan reached for her, but she was already pushing through the crowd, her blonde hair disappearing into the mass of travelers. The security officer looked between Ethan and Juliet with the expression of a man who'd seen this drama play out before. "Ma'am, if you'll just come with me, we can sort this out at the desk." Juliet handed Ethan the canvas bag, her movements calm and deliberate. "Here are your back cushions. I thought they were important to you." She turned to follow the officer, then paused and looked back at her husband, really looked at him. Without the charm, without the lies, without the financial security she'd provided, he looked smaller somehow, ordinary. "Enjoy Seattle, Ethan, or London, or wherever you end up." As she walked away, she heard him calling her name, but she didn't turn around. Behind her, the boarding announcement continued, and she knew that in a few minutes that plane would leave without him. But more importantly, she was finally seeing her husband for exactly who he was, and she was done being the woman who made his lies possible. The customer service desk at Dallas-Fort Worth felt like a small island of calm in the storm of Juliet's collapsing world. She sat across from Patricia Henley, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and 20 years of experience dealing with domestic drama at 30,000 feet. "Mrs. Carter, I need to ask, do you want to press charges for credit card fraud?" Patricia's voice was gentle but professional. Juliet stared at the paperwork spread across the desk. Ethan's flight confirmations, hotel reservations, even dinner bookings, all charged to the corporate card linked to her name. 6 months of expenses she'd never seen, never questioned. The numbers blurred together. $847 for a dinner at Le Bernardin in New York. $200 for a weekend at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. $20,300 for 2 first-class tickets to Seattle. "Not yet," Juliet said finally, her hand moving protectively to her belly. "But I want everything documented. Every transaction, every date, every location." Patricia nodded, understanding more than she said. "I'll have a full report ready within the hour. And Mrs. Carter, I'm canceling all cards associated with this account. No one will be able to use them without your direct authorization." As Patricia typed, Juliet felt her phone buzzing incessantly in her purse. "Ethan." She let it go to voicemail, then deleted the message without listening. 20 minutes later, Juliet walked out of the airport with a manila envelope full of evidence and a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Instead of heading home to their house in Plano, the house where she'd find Ethan's clothes in the closet, his coffee mug in the sink, his lies lingering in every room, she drove south. Austin was a 3-hour drive, but she needed the time to think. The highway stretched ahead of her, and with each mile she felt the weight of 6 years of marriage shifting off her shoulders. She'd been carrying Ethan's dreams, his ambitions, his lifestyle, and she'd been so focused on supporting him that she'd forgotten to notice when he stopped supporting her. Her phone rang. Ethan again. This time she answered. "Juliet, thank God. Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." His voice was strained, desperate. She could hear airport announcements in the background, which meant he was probably still at DFW, trying to figure out how to get home without his corporate card. "I'm driving," she said simply. "Driving where?" "Juliet, we need to talk. What happened today? It's not what it looked like." She almost laughed. "What did it look like, Ethan? I know how it seemed, but Ruby and we're just colleagues. That's all. She's young, she's enthusiastic about the project. Maybe she got a little too familiar, but nothing happened between us." Juliet pulled into a rest stop and parked under a streetlight. The sun was setting, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink, beautiful and final. "Ethan, do you remember what you had for breakfast this morning?" The question caught him off guard. "What? Toast, I think." "Why?" "You had oatmeal, with blueberries. I made it for you because you said your stomach was bothering you." Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "Do you remember what I was wearing?" "Juliet, I don't understand." "I was wearing your old college sweatshirt, the blue one with the hole in the left sleeve. I've been wearing it all week because it's the only thing that fits over my belly comfortably, and I was saving money for the baby by not buying new maternity clothes." She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Do you know what I did yesterday while you were at your late meeting? Juliet, I spent 4 hours researching pediatricians. I made a spreadsheet comparing insurance coverage, office locations, and patient reviews. I called 6 different practices to ask about their newborn care policies. Her voice was still steady, but something in it made Ethan stop trying to interrupt. Do you know what I did last weekend while you were at your emergency strategy session? Silence. I assembled the crib. By myself. 6 months pregnant, following the instructions, using YouTube videos to figure out the parts you said you'd help me with later. She could hear him starting to say something, but she continued. I know exactly how much money is in our joint account. I know exactly how much you've been spending on restaurants I've never been to, hotels I've never seen, and flights I've never taken. I know Ruby's full name, her address, her salary, and the fact that she's been working for your company for exactly 6 months. The same amount of time you've been coming home late, taking mysterious phone calls and telling me you're too tired to talk about baby names. The rest stop was quiet except for the hum of highway traffic and the sound of her own heartbeat. So, when you ask me what today looked like, Ethan, I can tell you exactly what it looked like. It looked like my husband holding hands with a woman young enough to be his daughter, using my money to take her on a romantic getaway, while his pregnant wife sat at home planning their child's future alone. Juliet, please. I'm not angry, Ethan. I'm not screaming, I'm not crying, I'm not making a scene, I'm just done. She hung up and turned off her phone. 2 hours later, she was sitting in a hotel room in Austin, her laptop open, creating a new email account that Ethan didn't know about. She opened a web browser and began researching divorce attorneys who specialized in infidelity cases. The first website she found had a testimonial from a woman named Claire. I thought my world was ending when I discovered my husband's affair. But it turned out to be the beginning of my real life. Juliet touched her belly, feeling Theo move restlessly inside her. You're going to have a strong mother, she whispered. A mother who doesn't settle for lies. She opened a new document on her laptop and began typing. Not angry letters or emotional outbursts. Lists, plans, strategies, bank accounts to separate, credit cards to cancel, passwords to change, documents to secure. Ethan had taught her about strategic planning in business. Now she was going to use those skills to plan her exit from their marriage, and she was going to do it so quietly, so efficiently, that by the time he realized what was happening, it would already be done. Outside her hotel window, Austin's lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in months, Juliet Carter felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. But this time, she was going to win. 3 days in Austin had given Juliet the clarity she needed. While Ethan left increasingly desperate voicemails, she worked methodically from her hotel room, her laptop surrounded by legal documents, bank statements, and a yellow notepad covered in her precise handwriting. The first call was to Margaret Cross, a divorce attorney with a reputation for protecting women's assets in high-stakes separations. Margaret's office was in downtown Austin, in a sleek building that spoke of competence and discretion. Mrs. Carter, Margaret said, reviewing the documents Juliet had compiled, this is some of the most thorough documentation I've seen from a potential client. You've essentially built the entire case for us. Juliet sat across from the attorney, her hands folded over her rounded belly. At nearly 7 months pregnant, she moved with deliberate care, but her mind was razor sharp. I'm a brand manager, Juliet explained. I'm used to building campaigns with data and evidence. This is just a different kind of campaign. Margaret smiled grimly. Your husband has been using your corporate credit for personal expenses, including what appears to be an ongoing affair. The evidence you've gathered shows a pattern of deception spanning at least 6 months. In Texas, this constitutes both financial impropriety and adultery. What does that mean for the divorce proceedings? It means you have significant leverage, especially since most of your assets appear to be in your name or joint accounts that you manage. That afternoon, Juliet made her second strategic move. She drove to a small business district in East Austin and found exactly what she was looking for: a furnished one-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop, available for immediate occupancy. The owner, Mrs. Rosa Martinez, was a grandmother who took one look at Juliet's condition and offered her tea instead of demanding references. My daughter went through something similar, Rosa said quietly as they signed the lease. Sometimes a woman needs a safe place to think. By evening, Juliet had established her base of operations. She sat at the small kitchen table, her phone finally turned back on, watching the messages roll in. 37 missed calls from Ethan, 12 voicemails, 16 text messages that started with apologies and escalated to panic. The latest text read, "Juliet, please come home. I can explain everything. I love you. I love our baby. Don't do this to our family." She deleted it without responding. Instead, she opened her laptop and began the systematic dismantling of their shared financial life. First, she contacted their bank and removed Ethan's access to their joint savings account, the account where her salary had been automatically deposited for 6 years, building the nest egg that had paid for their house, their cars, and Ethan's lifestyle. As the primary account holder, she had the legal right to protect those funds. Next, she changed the passwords on every account they'd shared: Netflix, Amazon, the utilities for their house, their insurance policies. Each click felt like cutting another thread in the web that had bound her to him. The third move was the most strategic. She contacted Lux Cosmetics' HR department and requested that her corporate credit account be frozen pending an internal review of unauthorized usage by a family member. She'd worked for the company for 8 years. They trusted her judgment. Her phone rang at 9:47 p.m. "Ethan." This time she answered. "What the hell have you done?" His voice was raw, angry. The charm was completely gone. "I've protected my assets," she said calmly. "Our assets, Juliet. Our money, our accounts, our life. My salary, my credit, my name on the lease, my insurance policy." Her voice was steady, factual. "I checked, Ethan. Your name isn't on any of the major accounts. I've been carrying this marriage financially for 6 years. You can't just cut me off like this. I have bills. I have commitments. Like Ruby." The silence stretched between them. "She's gone, Juliet. She won't return my calls. The whole thing was a mistake, a stupid mistake, and now she's disappeared and I'm what? Making you face the consequences of your choices?" She could hear him moving around, probably pacing their living room with the furniture she'd chosen, the art she'd bought, the mortgage she'd qualified for. "Where are you?" His voice was smaller now, almost pleading. "I'm where I need to be. Juliet, please. Come home. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Ethan, do you know what I realized today?" He waited. "I realized that for 6 years, I've been managing our entire life, while you took credit for the successes and blamed me for the problems. I've been the CFO, the project manager, and the emotional support system for a man who was secretly shopping for my replacement. That's not— I found the restaurant receipts, Ethan. Not just recent ones. Going back 8 months. Expensive dinners for 2 while I was eating leftover soup at home, saving money for baby furniture." She could hear him breathing heavily. "I found the hotel bookings, the weekend getaways that happened during your business trips. I found Ruby's employment records. She started working for your company the same week you told me we needed to cut back on expenses because business was slow. Juliet, I found the jewelry purchase from Tiffany last month, the one that cost more than I've spent on maternity clothes for this entire pregnancy. I'm assuming Ruby was wearing it today because I've certainly never seen it." The silence that followed was answer enough. "So here's what's going to happen," Juliet continued, her voice never wavering. "Tomorrow you're going to receive papers from my attorney. You're going to read them carefully, and you're going to realize that the woman you betrayed was also the woman who made your life possible. Don't do this, please. Think about our baby. I am thinking about our baby. I'm thinking about raising him to respect women, to honor his commitments, and to understand that actions have consequences." She paused. "I'm thinking about making sure he never grows up to be like his father." She hung up and turned off the phone again. Outside her window, the coffee shop below was closing, its warm lights dimming one by one. But Juliet felt more awake than she had in months. Tomorrow she would begin the next phase of her plan. Tonight, for the first time since she'd discovered Ethan's betrayal, she was going to sleep peacefully, because she was no longer the woman being lied to. She was the woman taking control. Ethan Carter had always prided himself on being a problem solver. In boardrooms across the country, he was known for his ability to navigate crises, to find solutions when others saw only obstacles. But sitting in his BMW in the parking lot of a budget inn, staring at a credit card that had just been declined for the 3rd time, he was beginning to understand that some problems couldn't be charmed away. The hotel clerk had been polite but firm. No valid payment method, no room. It was that simple. He tried calling his assistant, Miranda, but her voicemail message reminded him that it was after business hours. He tried his company credit card, but that had been suspended pending account review, whatever that meant. His personal accounts showed insufficient funds for anything beyond fast food and gas station coffee. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Carter was effectively homeless. Meanwhile, 200 miles south, Juliet was sitting in her Austin apartment, reviewing financial documents with the methodical precision of a surgeon. She'd spent the morning at the bank, officially separating their accounts and establishing new ones in her name only. The process had been surprisingly straightforward. Most of their major assets were already primarily hers. Her phone rang. Margaret Cross, her attorney. "Juliet, I've got some interesting news. Mr. Carter's employer has been trying to reach him all morning. Apparently there are some irregularities with his expense reports that require immediate attention." Juliet felt a flutter of satisfaction. What kind of irregularities? The kind that happen when someone has been using company resources for personal travel. "It seems your decision to flag the corporate credit usage has triggered an internal audit." Juliet touched her belly, feeling Theo respond to her voice with a gentle kick. "And what does that mean for him?" "It means he's likely going to be suspended pending investigation. And if they find what I think they're going to find, termination is a real possibility." That afternoon, Ethan sat in his supervisor's office at Sterling Marketing, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his tie crooked. James Morrison, the VP of Operations, spread out printed reports across his desk like evidence at a crime scene. "Ethan, these expense reports don't match your actual work travel," James said, his voice carefully neutral. "According to payroll, you were supposed to be in Chicago last month for the Henderson account, but your hotel charges show you were in New York, with additional expenses." Ethan's mouth went dry. "James, I can explain. And this weekend's Seattle trip, the one that was supposed to be for client development, except we don't have any clients in Seattle, and you charged 2 first-class tickets. The second ticket was for Ruby Lane, our external consultant. Ms. Lane resigned this morning, via email, from what appears to be a Starbucks in Phoenix." James leaned back in his chair. "She also returned her company laptop and access badge to our reception desk with a note saying she was pursuing other opportunities." Ethan felt the floor shifting beneath him. "She quit. She ran, Ethan. The question is, what was she running from?" By evening, Ethan was officially suspended without pay pending a full investigation of his expense accounts. He sat in his car outside the house in Plano, the house he could no longer afford with the mortgage payments that would now be impossible to make. He tried calling Ruby 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Her apartment complex informed him that she had terminated her lease and moved out the same day she quit. No forwarding address. The woman he'd risked everything for had disappeared the moment his credit card stopped working. His phone buzzed with a text from Juliet. "Divorce papers will be served tomorrow. I suggest you hire an attorney." He stared at the message until his eyes blurred. Then he called the one person he thought might still help him. "Mom, it's me. I need to come stay with you for a while." Nancy Carter had always been suspicious of her son's lifestyle, wondering how a marketing executive could afford such expensive tastes. Now, listening to him stumble through an explanation that involved misunderstandings and temporary cash flow issues, she began to understand. "Ethan, are you telling me you've been living off Juliet's money all these years? It's not that simple. And now you've cheated on her while she's pregnant and she's cut you off?" The silence stretched between them. "You can sleep on my couch for a week," Nancy said finally, "but you better figure out how to fix this mess. That girl deserves better than what you've given her." Meanwhile, Juliet was having dinner with Rosa Martinez downstairs in the coffee shop. The older woman had insisted on making her pozole rojo, claiming that pregnant women needed proper nutrition, not the takeout containers she'd seen Juliet carrying upstairs. "You're glowing," Rosa observed, ladling soup into a bowl. "Not just pregnant glowing. Something else." Juliet considered this. "I think it's relief. For months I felt like something was wrong, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Now I know I was right to trust my instincts." "And the baby's father?" "The baby's father is discovering what it's like to stand on his own feet for the first time in 6 years." Juliet took a spoonful of soup. "I don't wish him harm, Rosa. I can't be responsible for him anymore." Rosa nodded knowingly. "My late husband used to say that some people are built to carry others, and some people are built to be carried. The trick is making sure you don't carry someone so long that you forget how to put them down." That night, Juliet sat at her laptop, working on something new. Not legal documents or financial spreadsheets, but a business proposal. During her years at Lux Cosmetics, she'd developed ideas for a maternity and nursing skincare line, products designed specifically for women whose bodies and needs were changing. She'd always put the ideas aside, telling herself she was too busy supporting Ethan's career to focus on her own ambitions. Now, with Theo moving restlessly in her belly and the Texas night quiet around her, she began writing the proposal that would change her life. She wasn't just divorcing her husband. She was divorcing the version of herself that had believed she needed to be smaller to make someone else feel bigger. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was exactly the right size. The process server found Ethan at his mother's house in Richardson at 7:30 a.m., still in yesterday's wrinkled shirt and sleeping on a floral couch that had seen better decades. Nancy Carter answered the door with the resigned expression of a woman who had been expecting this moment for years. "Ethan Carter?" The young man in the crisp uniform held a manila envelope like it contained explosives. "That's him," Nancy said, pointing toward her son, who was stumbling toward the kitchen in search of coffee and dignity. The divorce papers were comprehensive, clinical, and devastating. As Ethan read through page after page of asset division, custody arrangements, and financial settlements, he felt his world contracting to the size of a legal document. Juliet was claiming sole custody of their unborn child. She was keeping the house, the savings account, and both cars. She was requesting alimony, from him to her, based on the financial support she had provided throughout the marriage. And attached to the filing was an exhibit that made his stomach drop. Every fraudulent expense he'd charged to her corporate account, organized by date and location. "She's trying to destroy me," he told his mother over instant coffee and generic cereal. Nancy looked at her son, really looked at him, for the first time in months. His hair was greasy, his face was unshaven, and his expensive suit was wrinkled beyond repair. But worse than his appearance was the entitlement in his voice, the inability to see himself as anything other than a victim. "Ethan, did you cheat on your pregnant wife?" "Mom, it's complicated. It's a yes or no question." He stared into his coffee cup. "Yes." "Did you lie to her about where you were going and who you were with?" "Yes." "Did you spend her money on another woman?" "It wasn't like that." "Yes or no, Ethan?" "Yes." Nancy stood up and walked to the sink, her back to her son. "Then she's not trying to destroy you, honey. She's trying to survive you." Meanwhile, Juliet was having a very different kind of morning. She sat in the conference room at Lux Cosmetics' Austin branch, her laptop open, presenting her maternity skincare line proposal to a room full of executives who had flown in from Dallas specifically to hear her pitch. The market for pregnancy and nursing skincare is currently valued at $1.2 billion, Juliet explained, her voice clear and confident despite being 7 months pregnant. But most products are either generic moisturizers rebranded for expectant mothers or expensive imports that aren't accessible to average American families. Linda Hutchinson, the company's CEO, leaned forward. "And you're proposing we develop our own line?" "I'm proposing we revolutionize it." Juliet clicked to her next slide, showing product mock-ups she'd designed over the past week. Affordable, dermatologically tested products that address real concerns: stretch mark prevention, nursing-safe ingredients, postpartum skin recovery, products designed by women who understand the experience, not marketing teams guessing at what we need. The room was quiet as the executives absorbed her presentation. Juliet had worked for this company for 8 years, but they'd never seen her like this. Fierce, visionary, completely in command of her expertise. "What would you need from us to make this happen?" Linda asked. "A development budget, a small team, and 6 months to create prototypes. I'll manage the project personally." "Even with the baby coming?" Juliet smiled, her hand moving to her belly. "Especially with the baby coming. I'll have first-hand experience with every product we develop." By noon, she had preliminary approval and a development budget that would allow her to hire her own team. As she walked out of the building, her phone rang. Margaret Cross. "Juliet, your husband has hired an attorney. Bradley Summers from Dallas. He's aggressive." "What does that mean?" "It means he's going to fight the divorce terms. Summers specializes in helping men claim spousal support from their ex-wives. He's probably told your husband that he can get alimony from you based on the lifestyle you provided during the marriage." Juliet stopped walking. "He wants me to pay him alimony?" "It's a common tactic when the wife is the primary earner. They claim the husband became accustomed to a certain standard of living and needs support to maintain it." For the first time since leaving Dallas, Juliet felt truly angry. Not hurt, not disappointed, furious. "Margaret, I want you to file a counterclaim. I want to sue him for every fraudulent charge he made on my corporate account. I want to claim damages for emotional distress caused during pregnancy. And I want to request that he be required to pay my legal fees." Juliet, that's going to make this divorce very ugly, very public. Good. Let everyone see exactly who Ethan Carter really is. That afternoon, Ethan sat in Bradley Summers' corner office in downtown Dallas, surrounded by leather-bound legal books and certificates that spoke of expensive victories. Summers was everything Ethan had hoped for: sharp suit, confident manner, and a reputation for turning divorces into profitable ventures for his clients. "Your wife made a mistake," Summers said, reviewing the papers. "She's shown her hand too early. All this financial evidence she's gathered, it proves that she was the controlling partner in the marriage. We can argue that you were financially dependent on her, that she isolated you from your own earning potential by managing all the accounts. Can we really get alimony from her? Texas law is very clear about spousal support. If one partner becomes accustomed to a lifestyle that they can't maintain independently, the court can order support payments." Summers smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Your wife supported you for 6 years. That establishes a pattern of dependency. What about the affair? Texas is a no-fault divorce state. Adultery might affect property division, but it won't prevent alimony claims, especially if we can prove emotional or psychological factors that led to your indiscretions." Ethan felt hope flickering for the first time in days. "What kind of factors? Postpartum depression affecting your wife's behavior? Work stress? The pressure of carrying a pregnancy? We build a narrative that your wife became emotionally distant, and you sought comfort elsewhere. Can we really blame Juliet for my affair? Mr. Carter, in a divorce the goal isn't truth, it's victory." But as Ethan walked out of Summers' office feeling optimistic for the first time in a week, he had no idea that his legal strategy had just made the biggest mistake possible. He had declared war on a woman who had already proven she was better at strategy than he was, and Juliet Carter was about to show him just how dangerous she could be when she stopped playing defense and started playing to win. The private investigator Margaret Cross recommended looked nothing like what Juliet had expected. Carmen Valdez was a soft-spoken woman in her 40s who ran her investigation firm out of a modest office in South Austin. She wore comfortable shoes, carried a worn leather messenger bag, and had the kind of unassuming presence that made people forget she was there, which, as Juliet was learning, was exactly the point. "Mrs. Carter, I've been documenting unfaithful spouses for 15 years. Carmen said, spreading photographs across her desk. "Your husband and Ms. Lane weren't nearly as careful as they thought they were. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos of Ethan and Ruby entering the Fairmont Hotel in Chicago, credit card receipts from romantic dinners, screenshots of Ruby's social media posts showing expensive jewelry and designer clothes that clearly exceeded her consultant's salary, text messages recovered from Ethan's work phone that had been subpoenaed as part of his company's investigation. But the most damaging evidence was something Juliet hadn't expected. Ruby had been posting about their relationship on her private Instagram account, thinking it was hidden from public view. Carmen had found a way to access it. "Look at this one." Carmen pointed to a screenshot dated 3 weeks earlier. It showed Ruby wearing a diamond bracelet with the caption, "When your man knows how to treat a woman right, now she's spoiled. We are blessed, we are never shared him." The hashtag made Juliet's blood run cold. Never shared him, as if she, the wife, had been the interloper. "There's more," Carmen continued, clicking through her tablet. "Hotel reservations going back 8 months. Always adjoining rooms. Always charged to your corporate account. And this?" She showed Juliet a photo that had been taken through a restaurant window. Ethan and Ruby at an intimate corner table, his hand covering hers, both of them laughing. The timestamp showed it was taken the same night Juliet had been at her pregnancy class, learning breathing techniques for labor. "I can testify to all of this in court," Carmen said. "But Mrs. Carter, there's something else you should know." Juliet looked up from the photographs. "Ms. Lane wasn't Mr. Carter's first affair. My research shows a pattern going back almost 3 years. Different women, same methods. Company expense accounts, business trip covers, expensive gifts." The room seemed to tilt around Juliet. 3 years? A marketing coordinator named Jessica Walsh in 2022. A client liaison named Melody Brooks in 2023. Always younger women, always company-related, always financed with your money. Juliet sat back in her chair, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. 3 years of betrayal. 3 years of lies. All while she had been planning their future, saving for their baby, believing in their marriage. "Mrs. Carter, are you all right?" Juliet looked up at Carmen, and the investigator was surprised to see not tears, but something much more dangerous: determination. I want everything, Juliet said quietly. Every photo, every receipt, every piece of evidence you can find, and I want you to keep looking. If there are more women, I want to know about them. 2 hours later, Juliet was sitting across from Margaret Cross, watching her attorney's eyebrows rise higher with each page of evidence. This changes everything, Margaret said. With this pattern of behavior, we can argue for punitive damages. In Texas, we can claim that he wasted marital assets on extramarital affairs. That's grounds for a larger settlement. What about his alimony claim? Margaret smiled grimly. His attorney made a tactical error by filing for spousal support. It opened the door for us to examine his spending habits in detail. No judge is going to award alimony to a man who spent 3 years embezzling from his pregnant wife to fund affairs with multiple women. That evening, while Ethan was eating microwaved dinner at his mother's house and strategizing with Bradley Summers over the phone, Juliet was having a very different conversation. She sat in her Austin apartment, laptop open to a video call with Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist who specialized in divorce recovery. But this wasn't a therapy session. It was research. Dr. Chen, from a professional standpoint, what would you say about a man who engages in serial infidelity during his wife's pregnancy? Well, clinically speaking, that behavior often indicates deep-seated narcissistic tendencies and an inability to handle major life transitions. The pregnancy represents a shift in attention and resources away from him, so he seeks validation elsewhere. And what about the financial aspect? Using the wife's money to fund the affairs? That adds a layer of psychological abuse to the infidelity. He's not just betraying her emotionally and physically. He's using her own resources to do it. It's a form of financial manipulation that compounds the trauma. Juliet was recording the call with Dr. Chen's permission. This conversation would become part of her legal strategy. Expert testimony about the psychological impact of Ethan's behavior. The next morning brought news that neither Ethan nor his attorney had anticipated. Margaret Cross filed a motion to freeze all of Ethan's remaining assets, pending a complete audit of marital finances. She also filed a motion to compel him to undergo psychological evaluation before any custody arrangements could be discussed. But the real surprise was the third motion, a request for emergency spousal support from Ethan to Juliet, based on the financial and emotional damages caused by defendant's pattern of marital misconduct during plaintiff's high-risk pregnancy. Bradley Summers called Ethan at 9 a.m., his voice tight with frustration. "Your wife's attorney just declared nuclear war," he said without preamble. "She's not just fighting your alimony claim. She's claiming that you owe her support payments. Can she do that? She can try. And with the evidence she seems to have." Summers paused, reviewing the motions that had been filed. "Ethan, is it true that you've been having affairs for 3 years?" The silence stretched between them. "Because if it is, and if she can prove it, your alimony claim just became the legal equivalent of a suicide bomb." That afternoon, Ethan sat in his car outside Juliet's old office building in Dallas, watching her former colleagues come and go. He'd driven there impulsively, thinking maybe he could convince someone to help him reach her, to make her understand that he was sorry, that he could change. But as he watched, he saw something that made his stomach drop. A delivery truck from a high-end baby furniture store was unloading boxes at the employee entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see people celebrating, someone holding up tiny clothes, the kind of office baby shower that Juliet had always talked about having. They were celebrating his son's upcoming arrival, without him. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Your father called. He saw the legal notices in the paper. He wants to know if you need money for an attorney." Ethan stared at the message, then at the building where his wife's colleagues were celebrating the baby he might never get to know, then at his reflection in the car window, unshaven, exhausted, wearing a shirt he'd slept in. For the first time since this whole nightmare had started, Ethan Carter began to understand that he wasn't just losing a legal battle. He was losing everything he'd ever had that was worth keeping, and the woman he'd betrayed was making sure he understood exactly what that felt like. The conference room at Sterling Marketing felt like a tribunal. Ethan sat at one end of a polished table, facing a panel that included James Morrison, the VP of Operations, Helena Walsh, head of HR, and 2 representatives from the company's legal department. The investigation into his expense accounts had been thorough, methodical, and devastating. "Mr. Carter," Helena began, her voice professionally neutral, "our audit has uncovered systematic misuse of company resources spanning 36 months. The total amount of fraudulent charges is $47,000. Ethan's hands were shaking as he tried to maintain composure. I can pay it back. I can work out a payment plan. You're terminated, effective immediately, James interrupted. Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will be reduced by the amount of fraudulent charges, and we're referring this matter to our legal department for potential criminal prosecution. Criminal prosecution? Ethan's voice cracked. Embezzlement, Mr. Carter. You stole from this company to fund personal activities. That's a felony. As security walked him to his desk to collect his personal items, Ethan could feel the stares of his former colleagues. Miranda, his assistant, couldn't meet his eyes. People he'd worked with for 5 years looked at him like he was a stranger. His corporate phone, laptop, and access cards were confiscated. His nameplate was removed from his office door before he'd even reached the elevator. 5 years of building his reputation, gone in one morning. Meanwhile, Juliet was experiencing a very different kind of morning. She sat in Dr. Patricia Reeves's office for her 32-week prenatal checkup, her belly round and prominent, her son active and healthy inside her. Your blood pressure is excellent, Dr. Reeves said, reviewing the chart. How are you feeling emotionally? I know you're going through a difficult time personally. Better than I expected, Juliet answered honestly. I thought I'd be more stressed, but I feel clear, like I'm finally making decisions that are right for me and my baby. And the father won't be involved. Juliet's voice was calm, final. It's better that way. Dr. Reeves nodded without judgment. She'd seen enough situations like this to know that sometimes a clean break was healthier than forcing a relationship that would only cause more pain. After the appointment, Juliet drove to her new office, a small but bright space in downtown Austin that Luxe Cosmetics had rented for her maternity skincare project. She now had a team of 3, a chemist, a packaging designer, and a marketing coordinator. Her business proposal had been approved with a budget that exceeded her expectations. As she reviewed prototype formulations for stretch mark cream, her phone rang. Margaret Cross. Juliet, we need to talk. Ethan's attorney wants to schedule a settlement conference. Already? The trial isn't scheduled for another month. His position has deteriorated significantly. He was fired this morning. Criminal charges are being considered, and I just received some interesting information from our investigator. What kind of information? Ruby Lane has been trying to contact him. Carmen intercepted some social media messages. She's in Phoenix, apparently working at a casino hotel, and she's been asking him for money. It seems she's pregnant. Juliet felt the world shift around her. Pregnant? We don't know if it's his, but the timing is suggestive. And here's the important part. She's been threatening to go public with their affair if he doesn't help her financially. Juliet sat back in her chair, processing this information. So she's trying to blackmail him? It appears so. Which means your husband is about to face exposure not just in divorce court, but potentially in the media. A pregnant mistress demanding money from a man who's already being divorced by his pregnant wife. That's tabloid gold. That afternoon, Ethan sat in Bradley Summers' office, watching his attorney's confidence evaporate in real time. You didn't tell me about the criminal investigation, Summers said, his tone sharp with accusation. I didn't know, and you didn't tell me about this Ruby woman being pregnant. Ethan looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past week. She says it's mine, but I don't know. She could be lying. Could be lying. Summers closed the file on his desk with a snap. Ethan, your case just went from difficult to impossible. You're unemployed, potentially facing criminal charges, and there's a pregnant woman in Phoenix who's threatening to sell her story to whoever will pay for it. What does that mean for the alimony claim? Summers laughed, but there was no humor in it. What alimony claim? You have no income, no assets, and no credibility. Your wife has the money, the evidence, and public sympathy. A judge is more likely to order you to pay her than the other way around. But you said, I said a lot of things before I knew you were a serial cheater who embezzled money to fund multiple affairs during your wife's pregnancy. Summers stood up, signaling that the meeting was over. My advice? Take whatever settlement she offers. Because if this goes to trial, you're going to lose everything, and it's going to be very public. That evening, Ethan found himself in a place he'd never imagined, the waiting room of a bankruptcy attorney's office. The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Frank Delacroix, reviewed Ethan's financial situation with the detached professionalism of someone who'd seen countless lives implode. You owe $47,000 to your former employer. Your credit cards are maxed out and your wife is claiming damages that could exceed $100,000, Frank summarized. You have no income and no significant assets in your name. What are my options? File for bankruptcy. Hope the criminal charges don't stick and pray your wife accepts a settlement that doesn't leave you homeless. Meanwhile, Juliet was having dinner with Rosa Martinez and her daughter Carmen, the same Carmen who had been investigating Ethan. The three women sat around Rosa's kitchen table, sharing pozole and watching Juliet's belly move as Theo kicked energetically. He's going to be a fighter, Rosa observed, smiling as she watched the obvious movement under Juliet's shirt. He already is, Juliet replied, her hand following the little foot that was pressing against her ribs. He's been active all day like he knows something big is happening. Carmen looked up from her phone. Speaking of big things happening, I just got word that Ruby Lane contacted a gossip blogger in Phoenix. She's trying to sell her story about the affair. Juliet felt a moment of concern, then realized it was for Ethan, not herself. The feeling surprised her. Will it affect the divorce proceedings? It'll make his position even worse, Carmen replied. Public humiliation, potential scandal. It eliminates any sympathy he might have gotten from a judge. And what about Theo? Juliet asked, her protective instincts flaring. I don't want my son growing up with news articles about his father's affairs. Rosa reached over and patted her hand. Mija, children are resilient. It's better he grows up knowing his mother was strong enough to protect herself than growing up in a house full of lies. That night, Juliet sat in her apartment, working on names for her new product line. She'd decided to call it Theo's Promise, skincare products that promised to support women through the transformative experience of pregnancy and motherhood. As she worked, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it without reading, then saw the first few words. Juliet, this is Ethan, please. She deleted the message without reading the rest. Some promises she'd learned weren't worth keeping. But the promise she was making to herself and her son? That one was going to change both their lives forever. The mediation conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Margaret Cross's law office in downtown Austin. Juliet arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a navy blue maternity dress that somehow managed to look both professional and powerful. At 34 weeks pregnant, she moved with careful dignity, her hand resting protectively on her belly where Theo seemed to sense the importance of the day. He'd been unusually active all morning. She sat in the conference room, reviewing her notes one final time when Margaret appeared in the doorway. He's here, her attorney said quietly. And Juliet, he looks rough. When Ethan walked into the room, Juliet barely recognized the man she'd been married to for 6 years. His once pristine appearance had deteriorated dramatically. His hair was unkempt, his suit wrinkled and ill-fitting, and there was a desperate, hollow look in his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting panic. Behind him, Bradley Summers looked like a man who knew he was about to lose badly. The mediator, Judge Patricia Hernandez, retired, took her seat at the head of the table. She was a small woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd presided over thousands of family disputes. Before we begin, Judge Hernandez said, I want to acknowledge that this is an unusual case. Mr. Carter, you're seeking spousal support from your wife, while Mrs. Carter is claiming damages for financial fraud and emotional distress. Mrs. Carter, you're 8 months pregnant and requesting sole custody of your unborn child. This is going to be a complex discussion. Summers cleared his throat. Your Honor, my client has been financially dependent on his wife for the duration of their marriage. He's entitled to spousal support to maintain the lifestyle he's become accustomed to. Judge Hernandez looked at him with barely concealed incredulity. Mr. Summers, your client was just terminated from his job for embezzling $47,000, which he used to fund extramarital affairs. Are you seriously arguing that Mrs. Carter should continue to support the lifestyle that enabled him to cheat on her? The marital misconduct is separate from the financial dependency. No, it's not. Margaret Cross opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder. Your Honor, the evidence shows that Mr. Carter used his wife's money to conduct affairs with at least 4 different women over 3 years. This wasn't occasional infidelity. This was a systematic pattern of using marital assets to fund an entirely separate romantic life. She spread photographs across the table. Ethan and Ruby in Chicago. Ethan and Jessica in New York. Ethan and Melody in San Francisco. Each image time-stamped. Each expense documented. Each lie meticulously cataloged. Furthermore, Margaret continued, Mr. Carter's most recent affair partner, Ruby Lane, is now pregnant and attempting to extort money from him. She's threatened to sell her story to tabloid publications if he doesn't provide financial support. Ethan's face went white. How did you know about that? Margaret smiled coldly. Mr. Carter, when you declare war on someone who managed your entire financial life for 6 years, you should expect them to be very good at gathering information. Judge Hernandez reviewed the evidence, her expression growing more severe with each page. Mr. Carter, is this accurate? Are you facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. And is Ms. Lane claiming that you're the father of her child? Yes. But I don't know if it's true. But you had unprotected sex with her while your wife was pregnant with your child? The silence in the room was deafening. Judge Hernandez turned to Juliet. Mrs. Carter, what outcome are you seeking from this mediation? Juliet took a breath, feeling Theo move restlessly inside her. When she spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and utterly final. I want sole custody of my son. I want Mr. Carter to relinquish all parental rights voluntarily. I want him to pay restitution for the money he embezzled from my corporate account. And I want a restraining order preventing him from contacting me or my child. Juliet, please. Ethan started to stand, but Summers pulled him back down. I'm not finished, Juliet continued, never taking her eyes off the judge. I also want it on record that any future children Mr. Carter may have with other women are not my responsibility. If Ms. Lane's child is his, he'll need to support that child with his own resources, not mine. You can't take my son away from me, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I made mistakes, but I'm still his father. For the first time since entering the room, Juliet looked directly at her husband. What she saw there wasn't the charming, confident man she'd married. It was a stranger who had used her love as a weapon against her. Ethan, answer me honestly. In the past 3 years, how many women have you been with while married to me? Juliet, how many? He looked down at his hands. I don't know. You don't know? Her voice remained steady, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. You don't know how many women you betrayed our marriage with? It didn't mean anything. Stop. Juliet's hand moved to her belly, where Theo was kicking so hard that the movement was visible through her dress. Our son is moving right now. He's been active all day like he knows something important is happening. And you know what I realized this morning? She stood up, her pregnant form commanding the room's attention. He's never going to remember a time when his parents were together. This baby will be born into a world where his mother chose to protect him from a father who doesn't even know how many times he betrayed their family. Tears were streaming down Ethan's face now. I can change. I can go to therapy. You had 6 years to change, Ethan. You had 6 years to be the husband I deserved and the father our son needed. Instead, you chose to steal from me to buy gifts for other women. You chose to lie to me while I was planning our child's future. You chose to expose me to potential diseases while I was pregnant. Judge Hernandez leaned forward. Mrs. Carter, are you asking for complete termination of parental rights? Yes. I want my son to grow up knowing that his mother was strong enough to choose what was best for him, even when it was difficult. Juliet, I'm begging you. She finally looked at him again, and Ethan saw something in her face that made him stop talking. Not anger, not hatred, but something far worse. Indifference. You're begging me now, but you weren't thinking about me when you were holding hands with Ruby in that airport. You weren't thinking about our son when you were charging romantic dinners to my credit card. You weren't thinking about our family when you were building a relationship with a woman who thought she'd never have to share you. She gathered her purse and stood to leave. The only thing I'm going to give you, Ethan, is what you clearly wanted all along. Complete freedom from the responsibilities of being a husband and father. As she reached the door, she turned back one final time. Oh, and Ethan, when Ruby's story comes out in the tabloids next week, you'll finally get the one thing you always wanted. To be the center of attention. I hope it's everything you dreamed it would be. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Ethan Carter alone with the wreckage of every choice he'd ever made. Outside in the hallway, Juliet Carter placed both hands on her belly and smiled. She was free. 6 weeks later, Juliet Carter stood in the maternity ward of Austin Medical Center, holding her son for the first time. Theodore James Carter, Theo, had arrived 3 days early, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and his mother's determined green eyes. He's perfect, Rosa Martinez whispered, standing beside the hospital bed with tears in her eyes. She had become more than a landlord over the past months. She was the grandmother Theo would know, the family Juliet had chosen for herself. Dr. Reeves finished her examination with a smile. Both of you are healthy and strong. Theo's vitals are excellent, and Juliet, your recovery is going beautifully. You should be proud of yourself. You handled labor like a champion. As the medical staff left them alone, Juliet looked down at her son's tiny face and felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. The delivery had been surprisingly smooth, aided perhaps by the fact that she wasn't carrying the stress of an unhappy marriage. She'd labored with Rosa holding one hand and Margaret Cross, who had become an unexpected friend, holding the other. There had been no frantic phone calls to an absent father, no waiting for someone who might not come, just Juliet, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her and her son's well-being. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen Valdez. Ruby's story went live in Phoenix Celebrity Weekly this morning. Headline reads, "Marketing Executive's Secret Life, Pregnant Mistress Exposes Affair Scandal. Thought you should know." Juliet deleted the message without reading it. Ruby's story, Ethan's humiliation, the tabloid drama, none of it touched her anymore. She had insulated herself and Theo from that chaos completely. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Margaret Cross entered carrying a briefcase and a huge bouquet of flowers. "How are my favorite clients?" Margaret asked, her professional demeanor softening as she approached the baby. "We're perfect," Juliet replied, and meant it. "Please tell me you have good news. The best news. The divorce was finalized yesterday. Ethan signed the papers relinquishing all parental rights in exchange for you dropping the restitution claims. He's also agreed to a permanent no-contact order." Juliet felt a weight she didn't know she was still carrying finally lift from her shoulders. "And the criminal charges?" "He pled guilty to a reduced charge and will serve 6 months of community service, plus paying back the embezzled money in installments. He's also required to undergo counseling for compulsive behavior." "Where is he now?" "Living in a studio apartment in Mesquite, working at a call center. His mother told him he wasn't welcome back at her house until he got his life together." Margaret paused. "Ruby's baby is due next month. DNA test confirmed it's his." Juliet looked down at Theo, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely unaware of the drama that had surrounded his conception. "That poor child. The difference is," Margaret said gently, "that child will have a father who's hopefully learned from his mistakes. Your son has something better, a mother who chose to protect him from chaos." Later that afternoon, Linda Hutchinson from Lux Cosmetics arrived with the entire Austin team. They'd brought champagne for the staff and sparkling cider for Juliet, along with news that made her smile wider than she had since Theo's birth. "The Theo's Promise line launches nationwide next month," Linda announced. "Pre-orders are already exceeding projections by 300%. The marketing team wants to feature you in the campaign. The woman who created products for mothers by a mother." Juliet looked around the room at these women who had supported her vision, who had believed in her when she was rebuilding her life from scratch. What would the campaign look like? Authentic stories, real mothers, real experiences. Your story, without the personal details, of course, of creating something beautiful during a difficult time. The tagline is, "Promise yourself more. Promise yourself more." Juliet liked that. 2 weeks later, she was back in her Austin apartment, the space above Rosa's coffee shop that had become her sanctuary. Theo slept in the bassinet beside her desk while she worked on her laptop, finalizing product descriptions and marketing materials. Her phone rang. Nancy Carter. Juliet hesitated, then answered. Ethan's mother had called twice since Theo's birth, and Juliet had ignored both calls. But something made her pick up this time. "Juliet, I know I don't have the right to ask, but could I see a picture of the baby?" The request was so simple, so human, that Juliet felt her resolve soften slightly. "Mrs. Carter, I know my son destroyed your marriage. I know he doesn't deserve to be part of that baby's life, but I raised him better than what he became, and I've been wondering if my grandson looks anything like Ethan did when he was born." Juliet looked at Theo, who was starting to wake up, his tiny fists stretching above his head. "He has dark hair," she said quietly, "and he's very alert. The nurses say he's unusually aware for a newborn. Like his mother, then." "Mrs. Carter, I need you to understand something. I'm not keeping Theo from your family to be vindictive. I'm protecting him from instability." "I know that, honey, and you're right to do it." Nancy's voice was heavy with sadness and acceptance. I wanted you to know that if you ever need anything, emergency babysitting, someone to talk to, anything, I'm here. Not because of Ethan, but because you're raising my grandson, and you're doing it alone." After hanging up, Juliet sat in the quiet apartment, thinking about family and forgiveness and the difference between the two. That evening, as she fed Theo and watched the sunset through her windows, she opened her laptop and began typing. Theo's Promise product launch. Founder's letter. When I was 7 months pregnant, my life changed completely. Not because of the baby I was carrying, but because I finally found the courage to promise myself more. More honesty, more respect, more peace. I created this product line during the most challenging period of my life because I learned that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Every product in the Theo's Promise line represents a commitment to treating yourself with the same care you'd give someone you love. Because you deserve products that work. You deserve relationships that honor you. You deserve a life that reflects your worth. Promise yourself more. You're worth it. Juliet Carter, founder. As she finished typing, Theo made a small sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a coo. She looked down at him and found him staring at her with those serious green eyes, as if he understood that they were building something important together. "What do you think, baby boy?" she whispered, ready to change the world. Outside, Austin's lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the distance, Rosa was closing the coffee shop for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build the life she and Theo deserved. But tonight, in the quiet apartment that had become their safe harbor, Juliet Carter felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete and perfect contentment with exactly who she was and exactly where she was going. She had promised herself more, and she had delivered. 1 year later, the conference room at the Austin Convention Center buzzed with energy as Juliet Carter stepped up to the podium. The Women in Business Leadership Summit had drawn over 500 attendees, and she was the keynote speaker. At 36, she looked radiant in a tailored burgundy suit, her hair styled in a confident bob that framed her face perfectly. In the front row, Rosa Martinez held 14-month-old Theo on her lap. The toddler was perfectly content, playing with a soft toy while his mother spoke to the crowd. His dark curls bounced as he moved, and his bright green eyes, so much like his mother's, took in everything around him with curious intelligence. "1.5 years ago, Juliet began, her voice clear and commanding, "I thought my life was falling apart. I discovered that the person I trusted most had been systematically betraying that trust while I was pregnant with my son." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. But what I learned is that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you forces you to become the person you were always meant to be. She clicked to her first slide, showing the Theo's Promise product line that now graced shelves in over 3,000 stores across America. "Today, my company employs 47 people, mostly women, mostly mothers. We've generated over $12 million in revenue in our first year. But more importantly, we've created products that help women feel beautiful and strong during one of the most transformative times in their lives." The applause was thunderous. In the audience, several women were wiping away tears. "I named my company after my son, Theo, because he represents promise. The promise that no matter how dark things get, there's always the possibility of something beautiful on the other side." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, women who had their own stories of struggle, triumph, and transformation. "I'm often asked if I regret what happened, if I wish my marriage had worked out differently, and my answer is always the same. I regret the pain, but I don't regret the outcome, because the woman standing here today, the entrepreneur, the mother, the leader, she couldn't have existed within the constraints of who I was before." Another click brought up a photo of Theo taking his first steps in the courtyard behind Rosa's coffee shop, his arms outstretched toward his mother. "My son will grow up knowing that his mother chose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and self-respect over false security. That's the legacy I want to leave him." The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Later, at the reception, Juliet mingled with other business leaders while Theo charmed everyone he met. Margaret Cross, now a close friend rather than just an attorney, approached with a knowing smile. "I have some news," Margaret said quietly. "Ethan's parole officer called. He's violated the terms of his community service. He's been drinking, missed several mandatory counseling sessions, and was caught trying to contact Ruby despite the restraining order she filed against him." Juliet felt a brief flash of sadness, not for herself but for the man Ethan might have been if he'd made different choices. What happens now? Jail time, probably 6 months. And Juliet? Ruby's attorney contacted me. She wants to surrender her parental rights too. Apparently she's struggling with addiction and can't care for the child. Juliet looked across the room at Theo, who was now toddling between conference attendees like he owned the place, his infectious laugh drawing smiles from everyone around him. "That poor baby," she murmured. "The child will likely go into foster care unless a family member steps forward." For a moment, Juliet felt the old instinct to fix, to rescue, to take responsibility for problems that weren't hers to solve. Then she looked at her son again, happy, healthy, surrounded by love, and remembered the lesson she'd learned the hard way. "I hope someone gives that child the stability they deserve," she said. "But it won't be me. Theo and I have our own life to build." As the evening wound down, Juliet found herself on the hotel balcony overlooking downtown Austin. The city sparkled below her, full of promise and possibility. Rosa had taken Theo back to the apartment for his bedtime routine, and for the first time in months, Juliet had a few minutes of complete solitude. Her phone buzzed with a text from Linda Hutchinson. "Phenomenal speech tonight. Board meeting tomorrow. We want to discuss expanding Theo's promise internationally. You've built something truly special." She smiled, thinking about how far she'd come from that day in the airport when her world had collapsed around her. That woman, the one who had carried someone else's dreams while neglecting her own, felt like a stranger now. Another text, this one from an unknown number. "Saw your speech online. Proud of who you've become. Nancy Carter." Juliet stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you. Theo is lucky to have such a caring grandmother, even from a distance." It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It was something more mature than that. Acknowledgement that families are complicated, that people can care about each other even when they can't be part of each other's daily lives. As she prepared to leave the balcony, her phone rang one more time. This caller ID made her smile. "How did it go?" Carmen Valdez asked. "Standing ovation," Juliet replied. "I think we might have inspired some women to promise themselves more." "Good. And speaking of promises, I have news about your ex-husband's latest drama, but I'm guessing you don't want to hear it." "You're right. I don't." "Smart woman. How's our favorite little CEO?" Juliet laughed. "Asleep in his crib, probably dreaming about his next hostile takeover of the playground. That boy is going to change the world. He already has," Juliet said softly. "He already has." An hour later, she stood in Theo's nursery, watching him sleep. His room was filled with toys, books, and photos of the life they'd built together. Pictures of his first birthday party, his first Christmas, his first steps. Every milestone celebrated, every moment cherished, every day lived with intention and joy. On the nightstand beside his crib was a framed photo from that day at the airport. Not of the confrontation, but of her walking away. Rosa had taken it without Juliet knowing, capturing the moment she'd chosen herself and her son over the lie she'd been living. In the photo, her hand rested on her pregnant belly, her chin was raised, and her eyes looked forward, never back. It was the moment Juliet Carter stopped being a supporting character in someone else's story and became the hero of her own. As she turned off the light and closed the door, she whispered the words that had become her daily mantra, the promise that had changed everything. "I choose more." And every day, in every decision, in every moment of joy with her son and pride in her work, she delivered on that promise. The story of Juliet Carter reminds us that sometimes the greatest betrayal can become the greatest gift. The gift of discovering who you really are when you stop trying to be who someone else needs you to be. Would you have had the courage to walk away from everything familiar to build something true? To choose uncertainty over comfort if it meant choosing yourself? Your participation on this channel is very important to us. Please leave your opinion in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.